Hello and welcome to the Bible Matters podcast. My name is Leo Elbourne, and in this episode we chatted to Felicity Carswell and Sarah Dargue, otherwise known as the Two Sisters and a Cup of Tea. We spoke to Felicity and Sarah about their wonderful podcast, Two Sisters and a Cup of Tea, a Bible study podcast to encourage people to get into the words. We heard amazing stories about how their podcast and their work is encouraging brothers and sisters across the world. And we spoke to them as well about the Gospel of John, some of their recent work and studies in the Gospel of John, as well as how the Gospel has been applied to their lives and helps to change them as followers of Jesus. My name's Leo Elbourne, and this is the Bible Matters podcast, encouraging you in faithful Bible teaching and ministry. Well, it's a tremendous pleasure to be here today with Felicity and Sarah, otherwise known as the Two Sisters and a Cup of Tea. Felicity, Sarah, welcome to the Bible Matters podcast.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be with you.
It's great to be here.
And of course, I don't think I could ever dream of being on a podcast with you without having a cup of tea. So here is
Very
the tea
good.
that Tiff...
Very, very good. Admirable. Yeah.
Commitment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's in the cup though? That's the question. You know, are you of the fruit tea
Actually-
variety or a normal, straight up?
I made it, so Leo, can you guess what you've got?
Oh, well, hang on. I thought this was just... Hang on. I'm fairly sure that's just a standard English breakfast with milk.
Yorkshire.
Oh, okay, you wanted the brands. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. That's very good tea knowledge. Well, so in the office, Tiff is probably number one tea maker, actually, in respects to quantity of teas made, but also quality, of course.
Thank you. I feel like I do know how you like your tea now.
How do you think I like it?
Quite milky. Well brewed, but milky. As in, I have to stop significantly lower down with the water.
Okay,
than
I see.
The nuances of a podcast relationship right there.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to start by saying the tea chat that you guys come up with is astonishing. As in, what are you on, 13 seasons or something now? And yet you still have comments to make about tea at the start of every episode.
It's really quite surprising, isn't it? Considering, we actually weren't massive tea drinkers before we started this podcast.
No, we were before the podcast, but it wasn't.
But, it's not been all of life kind of thing. It's been a gradual grower, hasn't it?
Yeah, didn't really drink a cup of tea until I was probably in my early 20s, isn't that?
Oh my goodness. Okay, wow, okay. What would the podcast have been without it? Two sisters and a glass of water.
Yeah.
No, do you know, that is kind of what prompted me to get into tea, is that when you're going out for a coffee or a tea or whatever with someone and you don't really want tea or coffee, having a glass of water is just socially awkward.
Yeah. Or even the hot chocolate option, I think, just something not right about it.
I know, just a bit kid-like, yeah.
The first job I worked at here in London, it was one of those teams where if you make a cup of tea, you've got to make it for everyone, which is really good. But their tea making requests were so extraordinarily specific. It was a real baptism of fire. The worst one was one of my colleagues who was really great. She claims that she could taste if the tea bag had touched the side of the mug.
Oh.
And so
That's another level, isn't it?
No way.
I can't imagine how that could possibly be true, but I never dared to test her to see if it was right.
Wow.
I'm intrigued.
I've never heard of such a thing. Was she just winding you up?
Yeah, probably. She probably laughed every time I walked to the kitchen, but there we go. Guys, I'd love to get a bit of a sense of something of your backgrounds and your life. Listening to your podcasts, we glean some details and they're really, really wonderful. But just in terms of giving us a better sense, a bigger picture of where you're from, who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about growing up? It was somewhere, I'd guess, in the north of England.
Do you want to kick us off, Felicity?
Yeah, we're just really southern.
Yeah.
We're from Dorset.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
No
Oh, my
way.
goodness. Do you consider yourself to have an accent?
Yeah, I know. I think we've both got a bit of a hybrid accent of. Well, Sarah definitely has, because she was.
I have lived in the north for a while. I don't live there anymore, but I've spent 9 or 10 years in the north, and you did as well, Felicity, didn't you? So
Yeah, And I became a Christian in Leeds, and then I lived in Leeds and Yorkshire. So I feel like my spiritual heart is up north, but we're definitely from the Dorset, southern rural.
And for those who don't know the UK, that like you can't really get more south.
Yeah, yeah. We grew up in a tiny little village in Dorset, very rural. Wow. We have a brother, which he's like the mystery brother, isn't he? When you suddenly become two sisters. We are actually two sisters and a brother.
Yeah.
He's younger than us.
Yeah.
Does he ever feature on the podcast?
He's not yet. Not yet. I don't think he's that keen either, is he? He's
no. He says he doesn't have a voice for podcasts. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
But wonderfully, we all became Christians in our 20s, didn't we? And very early on, very early on, the experience of being read with one-to-one and then reading with others was a hugely formative part of our experience and journey. Both of us in separate ways, but we were kind of both discipled through one-to-one ministry in that way. And it's just formed a massive part of our journey ever since. So we're very grateful for the way that the Lord enabled that through relationships, and has worked through that in so many ways for us.
Yeah. Can I ask how it was you guys became Christians? Because you've mentioned it again a few times on the podcast. You became Christians separately in your early 20s, but I don't really know the details.
Yeah, well, I am the older sister, which I don't know whether that really comes across in the podcast, but I am 3 years older than Sarah. And we grew up, I would say, for both of us. Well, actually, I don't know whether this is true, Sarah. I would have said that I was Christian because I was English, and we went to church a bit with our mum. But then, as I got to university, I met Christians who were very much living out the Christian life. I hadn't really considered that your faith would impact your everyday life, and
sure.
I was becoming very good friends with a girl who was very similar to me. We were doing the same course, we're both into sport and all those things, but she was a Christian, and it was very distinctive, especially in our sporting kind of social world that we were in. So it was intriguing to me, and I began to ask her questions, and she was a light in that. Interesting, I would only ask her questions at night time when we were out and about. I didn't really want to kind of engage with it in like, she's like, should we go for a coffee? I was like, I don't think so. No, let's just but eventually I was asking enough questions, and she said, why don't we sit down, I'll get you a Cadbury's cream egg, and why don't we sit down and read Mark's Gospel and just dig into the Bible a bit together. And so we met up, I don't know how long, over the course of a number of weeks, and we ate many cream eggs and got quite far through Mark's Gospel. And I just had never thought of the reality of Jesus. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? But it's just the evidence that he was a person who walked on this earth, and that he is who he says he is. And I hadn't really considered who he said he was anyway. And so then it felt like this just suddenly became a reality. I definitely had been living my life kind of my own way, and it was not going massively well, but it was you just make it work. And then I realized that if Jesus was who he said he was, that was going to impact, that was going to change the way that I was living my life. And then my friend, she took me along to church, and the guy preaching was talking about Jesus dying on the cross, not just for your Sundays, but for your whole life. And so you'd think at this point that I would be like, okay, well, that's it. This is it. I should just follow Jesus. But I actually then thought, this is going to change everything. And I tried to back away from most Christians that I knew. And it took me a long time, like a year or so, to really get to the point of saying, okay, Lord, I think you've got life to the full right here with Jesus. And then having become a Christian and decided this was the best thing ever, Sarah and I were quite close at this point, and I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just go and take her out for dinner, I'll tell her the gospel, and we'll just be Christians together, and that'd just be really fun and just like the best. And that's not in any way what happened, Sarah.
Oh yeah, how did it?
Do you know what? It's because not having it, was it?
It's because you didn't bring a Cadbury's cream egg, probably. That
Yeah.
was
It was the dinner was the issue.
Yeah, no chocolate for the win.
take me back to that dinner. So where was it?
I do remember it. I do remember the dinner. I remember kind of really not being interested. I was also quite hostile, wasn't I? So I did theology for A-level. I was taught by an atheist, and I had a ton of arguments stacked up against what Felicity was telling me. So I could see that her life was starting to change, but I was also just really, really not interested.
Okay. But
then life for me wasn't that straightforward. I ended up dropping out of art school in a way that I didn't expect and didn't want to. And I think that was the first time that I really felt like, oh gosh, like, you know, life's not gone as I want it to go. So I started uni afresh the following year. And I think my eyes were a little bit more open in that sense to what was life about. I was definitely questioning a bit more. And again, there was a Christian in my group of friends, and she was living life differently. Like, it was a wrestle for her. She was obviously kind of trying to work out whether her faith was her own or just her parents', but she was being distinctive. So I started silently just watching her.
Oh, wow.
And Felicity kept persevering. She kept talking to me when she could. But the crunch moment for me was my final year of uni. I kind of properly came back from the summer and thought, right, I really need to start investigating this seriously, either to kind of reject it outright or just to kind of know that I have done my homework properly on it. But I didn't tell you, Felicity, did I? I didn't tell you that I was doing, like, exploring Christianity. I didn't tell you that I was having these conversations I was on a work placement in an art gallery at the time, surrounded by Christians, and I was like, oh, what's going on? But I did I had a very distinctive moment of I sat on the sofa and I gave my life to Christ. And I remember calling you and saying, I think I've just become a Christian. You basically fell off your chair.
It's like a stealth kind of conversion. Like, what? Yeah. What is this? How did it happen? Like,
That's amazing.
So for me that was a very definite moment, a definite kind of change of direction in life, and that that was a kind of distinctive moment of really from then really hungering for Jesus, for the Word, for wanting to dig deeper. And so I kind of changed tack on what I was going to do next after uni, and that's kind of where it all begun.
And what did that change of tack look like? As in, what was your route before, and how did the Lord change it?
Yeah, so I was kind of seeking to head into the art gallery world in some way. I hadn't quite kind of firmed up what that was going to look like, but knew that was kind of the obvious track for me. But actually, Felicity persuaded me to kind of go and help out in one of these summer camps, Christian summer camps, and I was a bit like, why are they not paying me to go and do that? Like, why am I just going to go and volunteer and give my time and actually give some money to go and wash dishes? What? Yeah. But actually, that was just transformative for me in terms of Christian service and digging into the Word properly with others and seeing it change my heart and change lives. And so, I asked them if I could come and do their kind of, their apprentice scheme for a couple of years. And so I moved to Manchester to do that. I didn't know anyone there, but I kind of thought, right, I really want to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And that was a hugely formative couple of years for me, being grounded in Scripture and what it is to start teaching the Bible and start reading it with others, and just really enjoying Jesus for myself.
And what about you, Felicity? Because you've worked in church ministry for quite a long time now. Is that right?
Well, out of university, I was at university for a while. It felt like actually I did a master's, and then I realised about a few weeks into my master's, I realised that I'm not great on my own in the library for a long time. I was an English literature student, so I went to study. So then I decided to be a teacher, and so I went on to train to be a teacher. Then I was a high school English teacher for a number of years, and then I realised the church that I was at. I was in Leeds at this point. The church that I was at, I had got involved in the student ministry. I was helping out with the student ministry, and the heartbeat of the student ministry, the guy who was running it, was really keen on the one-to-one ministry. He's like, this is what we should do with it. So there weren't loads of students coming to church, but every student who came to the church, we should make sure that they have the opportunity to be read one-to-one with. While I had encountered that before, I hadn't encountered it in such a kind of, this is what we're about in this aspect of ministry. And so I loved that. I thought this is just a wonderfully relational way of getting into the Word together, and I saw the fruit of that. So I started giving more and more of my time to that. And then I realised that I was really feeling a bit resentful of my English teaching, because I really wanted to be teaching people the Bible more. And so at that point, I headed down to London to do the St Helens Associate Scheme. I actually thought that I would just do a year and then go back to teaching and just be better equipped. I had realised that I was teaching the Bible a bit, and I maybe didn't know that much, so I was trying to just really be equipped. But then I ended up staying at St Helens, and I did the city women's work for a while and met my husband Jonathan, and that's when we moved back up north. And I actually haven't worked formally for a church since then. You know, I run our women's ministry at our church here, but it's a voluntary position. I haven't done a kind of paid employment in that sense.
And can you take me back to the moment you guys decided you were going to start a podcast?
I mean, I can't really take you back to a moment, because it feels like there were a ton of conversations. There were a ton of conversations and a ton of prayers and a ton of kind of angsty, oh, should we, shouldn't we? It was during lockdown. It was in that kind of crazy pressured season for us. We both had tiny children. We were hungering for more Bible. We were kind of podcast listeners, but we were just hungering for more of the Word to kind of sustain us in that intensive season. And I think the more that we talked, and it coincided with Felicity also moving to the States. You moved to the States before COVID hit, didn't you? That summer before. And we were trying to think through how do we intentionally keep growing as sisters and keep growing our relationship. And the more we talked about reading the Bible with one another, the more we kind of also talked about, well, we wonder whether actually our conversations may be able to serve others as well. That it wouldn't just be just us, but is there a case for seeking to serve others in the way that we get the Bible open, and just try and model and encourage what it could look like over 20 minutes over a cup of tea. So it wasn't kind of one kind of, light bulb moment of like, oh, this is it, this is what we're going to do in life. It was a kind of gradual idea, wasn't it, over that first kind of COVID lockdown.
I think the initial sort of there like is a combination of all those things. And then I actually interviewed Sarah. She's written a book, Bumps, Babies and the Gospel, and I interviewed her for 10 of those actually. We just had a quick sort of audio interview, and as we came off it, we're like, oh, it's quite fun, isn't it? But so that was a kind of seed of like, oh, is there something here in this dynamic? But then I do remember we had sort of said, okay, we got to the point where like, okay, well, let's give it a go, and we had some trial run conversations. It was bad, wasn't it? It basically was bad because I can't help being a teacher. I'm just born teaching. Sarah's like, just
so I was just sat there listening to Felicity teaching me. I was like, this isn't fun. I don't want to do this.
Yeah. So we had to refine the dynamic. Turns out, just be ourselves and it's okay. Don't try and teach anything.
Can you both tell us a little bit about your podcast? Thinking for the listeners who haven't listened to Two Sisters and a Cup of Tea, which we can really recommend, what happens in an episode of your podcast?
Well, we sit down together. I mean, we are on opposite sides of the Atlantic, so we sit down via technology.
Virtually together.
Virtually together, exactly, with a cup of tea in hand, and often an English biscuit, the one with the snap. I have to clarify that because over here, I'm in America, and when you say biscuit, they think gravy and dumpling, really. So
well, I noticed this about your show. That I think when you first started, you didn't say English style biscuit, and then it creeps its way in. Yeah. But is this right? In recent, the more recent series, maybe you weren't clarifying. Is that right? Or are you still having to make it very clear?
Maybe, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think we have stopped clarifying quite so often, but still does need clarity brought to it more often than you think over here.
So either English style biscuit or biscuit with a snap.
Yeah, biscuit with a snap. Yeah.
Biscuit with a snap.
Okay, cool.
So we sit down with our cup of tea and we've got our Bibles open, and each season we our habit is to walk through a book of the Bible, and our aim is to be in the Word together, trusting that the Lord works through his work by his Spirit, and as we're doing that, we're wanting to drive it to the heart. And each episode is just 20 minutes long. And we decided on 20 minutes because we thought that was actually a very manageable time. Some of these podcasts are really long, and I have to listen in installments, and that means that I never get to the second installment. So we thought 20 minutes was about right in terms of we're starting a conversation. We're not seeking to just, crack Mark 4 or whatever it is we're in, but we're starting the conversation. And our aim is, well, really, for us, we're in God's Word together, and we are seeking to hear him and to be shaped by the Word, and we know that to be true. We've been wonderfully growing as we've been in the Word together. But for our listeners, we want to model what it is to just get into the Word in our everyday. You don't have to be in church. You don't have to be in a Bible study setting. You don't need to be seminary educated. You don't need to be an expert. God is working through his Word. And so let's try and get it open, over a cup of tea, but also over a play date, like over a walk in the park, whatever it may be. And as we do that, we're hopeful that actually our listeners, well, firstly, they will be encouraged to get into the Word for themselves. Hopefully this gives them a taste of just the joys of being in the Word. But also they might just then feel confident to grab someone else and say, hey, do you want to get into John's Gospel together? Like, this is what I want to do, and give it a go. And we have some show note questions at the end of each episode that help people then get that discussion going. We're really wanting to demystify what it is to get the Bible open with other people. And the real joy of it has been, actually, Sarah and I have just loved being in the Bible together as well.
Very cool.
Yeah, our kind of big words we kind of talk about quite a lot, wanting to model what it can look like. So just extending that invitation and helping people to see that it's not as complicated as it might be. We want to equip people. So as we open the Bible, we are like, we've obviously spent time in it. We're not coming to it cold. We have spent, we tend to live in a book that we're studying. But equipping people to think about how you might approach this book of the Bible and what it looks like to approach these hard passages and have these hard conversations. And also, as Felicity said, encourage people to give it a go, trusting that the Lord is wonderfully at work as we do that.
And tell us, how is it going at the moment? You're in season 13, am I right?
Yeah, we're just in the process of pressing record on season 13. So we've just wrapped up season 12, and season 13 is round the corner, isn't it? I don't think we realised we would be pressing record on season 13. I think we could have been surprised, haven't we, that we're still going, and we've had many kind of ups and downs in that process of should we keep going? Like we quite often will have the conversation of, is this wise use of our time? Is this okay for our family life and involvement in church life and local life? What's the balance like? I think we ask one another quite a lot on that, don't we? Even last night, Felicity was asking me, like, how are you feeling about the podcast thing? So I think there's always a kind of rumbling discussion going on, but we're just, as Felicity was saying, we're just so grateful to the Lord for how he's been at work in us, first and foremost. It's been almost 4 years of us pressing record and growing in our love and knowledge of the Lord, and that's just priceless. But also we now have a couple of women who help us, Helen and Hayley, generously funded by listeners who are partnering with us. There's a kind of team of us who make it happen now, which is wonderful. And we're just super encouraged with the amount of feedback we get of how helpful people seem to be finding it. We're always kind of quite surprised that people are kind of genuinely enjoying our conversations and also being spurred on by them, and that's just always wonderful to hear. Because as a podcast, and I'm sure you guys know this, you put something out there and you don't know, you just don't know, do you? And in one sense, that's really helpful for us. We're just like, okay, we're faithful to what we want to do here, faithful to the Lord, and we trust Him with any fruit that comes from this. But you don't see most of the fruit in this kind of situation at all. So anytime you do get an email, you're like, oh, great!
It's a joy to hear from people.
No, I know that feeling, and it's hard, isn't it? Like if you were just doing it for profit or whatever, at least you've got a very easy metric to measure. But actually, when you're trying to build the kingdom, you just have no idea. And we do pray that often. We pray, Lord, if this isn't the right thing. If this is the time to stop, please make it clear to us. You said you were hoping to kind of demonstrate one-to-one ministry as you do this podcast. In terms of the feedback you've kind of been getting back, has that been how it's been received?
Yeah, I think we have a surprising range of people actually who are engaging with what we're doing. So we have just the best messages are just when someone says, I've been enjoying listening to you guys and I've been praying about asking my friend or my niece or my granddaughter or whatever it may be, and do you know what? They've said yes, and we're just getting going in John's Gospel or whatever it may be, and that's such a range of different people. Sometimes we do hear from a fair number of older ladies who have been Christians for a long time but have never had the confidence to just give it a go with someone else, and you just get these wonderful, just the best that they're actually doing it, and that can be some people are doing it with a cup of tea at their kitchen table, but others, we have people talking about ongoing voice memos between people, leaving voice messages.
Gosh.
Or we have some people are using it in small groups. So this was an unexpected aspect. We didn't know that this was going to be a thing, but the podcast has been used by some churches as a resource for their just getting women's Bible study going, like especially over the summer. We found that was a thing.
Okay. Wow. So they just kind of listen to it, and then do they just chat about your discussion questions or something?
There's a whole mixture of how people seem to use it. I think, from people listening to it before, and then they come and then they discuss. They kind of have some of their own questions, and they use our questions as well, or they just listen to us in the room. There's a whole range of how people use it. But yeah, that's definitely been a big surprise. And I think as we both lead women's ministry in our own churches, we see the wisdom of what they're doing there, because the challenge of coming up with like new kind of studies and new content is kind of exhausting and tiring. So actually what people have decided to do without us even realise is just start using the podcast as a kind of base resource to kind of build from, and as a springboard into their Bible studies. And that's, it's been encouraging to see that the Lord has chosen to use it in that way.
We've there was a really encouraging couple of people actually who got in touch. So we've had a few missionaries be in touch with us, and I think it's been helpful for them abroad. And then we had a couple of girls in Hungary get in touch saying, would you mind if we basically copied what you did and produce a Hungarian podcast with this? And then another couple of girls in France and Belgium.
I'm sorry, did you say, you said absolutely not?
I said no, it's copyright. What?
Got to do it with coffee, not tea.
Yeah. What do they drink in Hungary? Is it still tea?
So they've kicked off that, and then there's a couple of French-speaking girls who.
So cool.
Two sisters and a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And a baguette.
Yeah, croissant.
And I think that is really encouraging in the sense of this is really simple what we're doing. There's no bells or whistles really. It really is, we're just getting the Bible open. And I know that's not quite as straightforward, because we have spent time, in the book, and both of us, Sarah and I, have both been privileged to receive a bit of training over the years as to how to read the Bible and how to understand it. But there is also just a simplicity to it that we just need to get the Bible open in our everyday lives and allow God to shape the way that we go about these relationships and how we live our lives, obviously, as a result.
I'd love to ask, what have you guys learnt about Bible teaching along the way?
I think one thing I would say is that there is more nuance, and when we only have 20 minutes, and there's no way that you can nail down like the main point in that time. And that's quite a good thing, because my temptation, can be quite black and white about things, and my temptation can be a bit too kind of like, let's just work it out and then work out how to apply. I think what we've really benefited from has been the conversational nature of this, the toing and froing. Sarah and I spend quite a lot of time we call it the preamble, but we're kind of just talking around the passage and working out, like just pushing it into different corners of application. Like, what is it? Okay, if it played out here, what would it look like? And so they're kind of, rather than it being like, this is it, let's just work out the main point and then just work out how to apply it. Actually, there's so much richness in just soaking in it and being open to just, what is it that is being said here? Why is it being said? Like, what is the implication then? I don't know, Sarah, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think the crucial, just the gift of varied perspective. And Felicity and I are fairly different in how we would approach kind of starting to study the Bible and kind of try and work through our different Bible tools and try and kind of come to our main point and kind of that kind of thing. But actually, that only adds to our discussion, that only adds to our conversation, because God willing, we're modelling that you don't need to be in, one way of studying this. You don't need to have a kind of set formula that you follow, or you need to be a particular type of person to open the Bible and read this. What happens when you open it is that the Lord promises to work by his Spirit, and he will show you in different ways how that's going to apply to your heart, and to then talk about those things and to share your perspectives. Like, countless times Felicity's brought up stuff that I'm like, wow, I literally have I haven't seen that in that passage, and what richness that adds to my own then application as I go away from that passage. I think just that kind of the nature of the conversation itself, and the Lord using two or more different people in that is the way it adds to the depth of your understanding is just so valuable.
It is wonderful how that is so true, that we all come to read the Bible with different experiences, different past backgrounds, and even just different skills. And some of us will spot repetitive themes or repetitive phrases, something quite black and white, I guess you could say, and others will spot colour and depth and tone and all of that. And just actually when you come together reading the Bible one-to-one, you get both, and you do see, as you said, Sarah, like such depth there that really does pull you back and go, actually, the way I read it isn't the one and only way of handling a text, but you get the benefit of somebody else's view.
And that I think that is all a part of the conviction that God really is working in our hearts as we read his word. And that's true of everyone who is opening up the Bible. That's not just true of the person who's teaching the Bible, but actually God is at work in all of us by his Spirit through his word. And so there is value in hearing and responding to what someone else is receiving from that text, and how he is speaking into their heart. Sarah and I are different in approach. We're really different in personality, and kind of the things which resonate for us are going to be just slightly different. And that's been, so I feel like we have matured by being in the word together, but also through just hearing and experiencing how it is being applied into each of our different lives. And it's there's a richness to that, which is then I think feeds into a Bible study dynamic as well, like in that kind of Bible study group dynamic. There's huge value in everyone participating in the discussion as we're in the word, because God is working in all of these different people.
Going forward, what are your hopes for this podcast and how God might be using it?
Great question. I mean, in some ways we don't know. We're just kind of going with the flow and continuing to pray. As we were saying before, Lord, keep using this for your glory, and keep the main thing. Actually, as we open up the Word, as we behold Jesus, as we seek to sit under what He says and seek to grow in our awe and wonder of Him, may others follow, and may others seek to do that in with people in their own lives. I think, that's the main thrust, isn't it, Felicity, of what we're seeking to do, what we continue to long to do, whilst also acknowledging that seasons of life ebb and flow, and we hold lightly to it in that.
I think, as long as the Lord is seeming to use it for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of others, that while it is an encouragement to others and seems to be equipping others, and while we have capacity to do that, then we seek to be faithful in that. I don't know. It's as Sarah said earlier, we do talk probably surprisingly frequently about, should we press record again? Like, it's not a given that this is just once you've started something that you just kind of carry on. And but
we talk a lot about how to guard our hearts in it as well, because actually it's an abnormal thing to press record on your conversation in this way, isn't it? Like it's and we're really aware that the temptation to fear man over fearing the Lord in it is always there. And so we've had numerous conversations, particularly in the last couple of months, about what does it look like to guard our hearts, and to make sure that local life is getting the best of our ministry as well. Whilst this is a real life giver for us and it is a real energizer and we love it, actually it's different when you're in person with the people that the Lord has put in your life day to day, and seeking to give those people the best of your skill and your time in that as well, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, but we are massively enjoying it as well.
Yeah. I know, that sounds like we're hanging out the headphones. We're not.
We're not at all. We feel very privileged to have been given this opportunity by the Lord, and it's a continual surprise that we're doing it. Really, it wasn't a planned event as such, and here we are 4 years later, and the joy is big, which I hope comes across as we're chatting about it.
On this series of Bible Matters, we've been thinking particularly about the Gospel of John. We've heard lots of wonderful insights into the Gospel itself, as well as hearing wonderful, wonderful stories on how the Gospel's being taught in all sorts of ministries over the world. And it's on that note I particularly wanted to speak to you guys, because you guys have now done 2 series of your podcast on the Gospel of John. I guess, can I ask first of all, how do you choose which book you're going to teach on your podcast, and why did you choose the Gospel of John when you did?
Good question. When we first started, we just really wanted to do some hard books. We were just really eager to kind of get into the books that you wouldn't normally pick up yourself and study. And we really enjoyed doing that. And as we kind of gained momentum, we started to think and pray through more what would be helpful for listeners tuning in, and what is that kind of balanced, varied diet of scripture that we are seeking to kind of consume for ourselves and for those who are kind of regularly listening in. I think we landed on John's Gospel. We thought this is a gospel that we really want to delve into. The riches of it have always intrigued us, and we've never I don't think either of us had kind of properly kind of dug into it in the way that we have chosen to do on the podcast before. And we just thought, in terms of unbelievers, in terms of new believers, in terms of mature believers, you can't go wrong with gazing at Jesus in the book of John, can you? Just to be able to put him front and centre and to come back to him time and again, we were excited by that prospect, and thought, let's do it. Whilst also recognising it's a lot of chapters, and there's so much depth that we couldn't possibly do it in one season. So we decided to split it. So as you say, we've done 2 sections so far. We've done chapters 1 to 5, and then 6 to 12, and at some point we'll come back for the next section.
And I guess just to give us a sense of your methodology, as it were, or what you actually do. So you've picked the Gospel of John, or you picked the Gospel of John. Just take us through how you began studying it and coming up with the material for your podcast.
Well, whenever we're getting into a book of the Bible, then we want to be considering the whole book. So even though we broke it up into the sections, first of all, we want to establish the main drive really of the book, the melodic line, if you like, and so John is really helpful, isn't he? Because in that last chapter, the second last chapter, he gives us the purpose in chapter 20 verses 30-31. So that
sorry, what is that? It's
but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
So that then determines, as we're reading any part of John's Gospel, that is what John is seeking to do as he's writing this account. And so whatever section we're in, we're then seeking to align it or understand how it fits with that purpose. And there's just so much in John of Jesus, beholding and believing Jesus and realizing that he is the one who brings eternal life. And so we basically then got into the different sections. That first season we were doing chapters 1 through 5, and a large part of it was just working out as we walked through, well, how does this help us to behold Jesus? How does it convince us that Christ really is the one who gives eternal life? And so in terms of our methodology of how we go about that, we have an ongoing Google Doc where we exchange ideas, and we're kind of working out what we think the main point is of those sections. Each episode of our podcast, we're taking a little chunk. We're not doing the whole thing in one episode. So we're walking through chapters 1 through 5. And we're then in our conversation, we're seeking to establish why we think that is the main drive of what's going on, and then how does that drive it to the heart? How does it apply? And a lot of the application throughout John's Gospel is, how does this help us to behold and marvel at Jesus? And there's something about just the way that John writes, which is just, it's so profound, isn't it? But it's incredible because it's so simple.
Yeah.
That you can open this with an unbeliever, but also it's so profound that there's just depths and depths that you could always just go deeper. We had Karen Sewell on as a guest, and she had this illustration of she lives quite near the Lake District, and you can be dipping your toes in the lake, and you can see everything that's around you, and that is just a beautiful thing, and that is that is good. But you could go deeper into the lake. And as you get deeper in, you maybe behold more. You're looking around you and you behold more of the vista, of the scene, and you're experiencing more of it. And that's a bit of what is happening as you're in John's Gospel, because there's so much fulfillment of the Old Testament. There's so much. It's not, when he says something, usually he's not just saying that. He's usually saying like 5 other things at the same time. And as you get into the writing more and more, you realise, if you just look up Exodus at this point, or Psalm 23, or whatever it may be, suddenly this moment just explodes. We had some moments, didn't we, Sarah? We're like, no way. We never realised that this is what is being said. And and it does just cause you to delight in Jesus more and more. And so
it's funny. I mean, Gwilym Davis, who's a Bible teacher who's really helped us this series on John, he said something really interesting, I think, which he says, John is, he thinks, the hardest gospel. That's a valid claim, I think. But he also says what's so interesting is if you ask non-believers, or even very, very biblically illiterate believers, what their favourite gospel, their story about Jesus is, the chances are they'll say something in John. And the point he was making is there is just this exceptionally captivating beauty, which is very hard to get to the bottom of in some respects. But actually, as you're saying, even on the shallow level, it is actually captivating to see Jesus in this way. I wonder just if you guys could share particular truths from your series on John so far, so chapters 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 or 6 to 12, any particular truths about Jesus that you were blown away by?
I mean, as you say, there's so much, isn't it? And every interaction, I think for me, kind of as you walk through the opening chapters, it's the interactions with the different people that are just so astonishing in his gentleness, in his grace, in his patience. We've been doing a study on the fruit of the Spirit recently, and just seeing Jesus live out all the kindness, all the gentleness, all the faithfulness of God in his interactions with others is just a beautiful thing. And the way that he seeks to engage people in conversation, the questions he comes with, the way that he kind of exposes people's hearts, but in a way that only kind of helps them to kind of behold him more rather than put them to shame in some way. Like it's beautiful the way that he interacts with people, and that how, as you're kind of saying, there's just such an attractiveness to him. You're kind of drawn to him in that, and I think that's just been really, really striking for us, Felicity, hasn't it? What else would you add?
Yeah, I think that you have, I think that's absolutely right, these interactions that show you more and more of Jesus' character. And then you begin to get into the I am statements as you go further on. And I remember John 10 being like just absolutely, I feel like I've come back to that again and again, just seeing that he is the good shepherd. And then if you bring in anything Exodus like Psalm 23, you've got just that statement of I am the good shepherd, and you see him and his compassion towards his people. And then as you then see that and you're captivated by that, and then you watch this good shepherd walk on towards the cross, and there's just the depth of love and the way in which he knows us and knows what we need, and that sacrificial steps that he's taking, and as you begin to see it unfold, I think I love the way that John, he just gradually slows down as you move towards the cross, and so Jesus is just all the more sort of front and center. In those first chapters, it's very much like, wow, Jesus is, wow, okay, who is this guy? And everyone around him is just reacting like that, or okay, well, he must be this person, he must be this person. And then as we move further on in the account, the narrative slows a bit and you get more discussions with the disciples, and there's just some profound theology in there that, you know, it really does begin to, because we're hearing it from this Jesus that John has described in all these ways, the theology then, I think it just lands differently because it comes from this heart of gentleness and compassion and shepherding, and I know that's true of all the theology in the Bible, but there's something about hearing it out of the mouth of Jesus in John's Gospel that just, yeah, it's very profoundly changing, I think.
You talked a bit about, as you're working, you're getting Bible truths and applying them to your life. I guess just with any book of the Bible or with John's Gospel, what is actually the process for you in doing that? How do you take these truths and think, yeah, this is relevant for me?
Good question. And I think the Pharisees in John's Gospel give us a textbook answer of how not to, don't they?
Okay.
So in chapter 5, Jesus kind of says to them, you avidly study the scriptures, you diligently study them because you think you have eternal life through that, but actually you fail to come to me in it. And I think that is just so challenging for us who are kind of spending our time studying the Bible and pressing record on our conversations, that actually that we would first and foremost have that lens of coming to Jesus as the kind of centre point of how we're applying this word that we're opening up together, that we're not just studying for the sake of studying. We're not studying to gain more knowledge about Jesus. We're studying so that we would heed his invitation. We would long to come to him, the one who says, I will never drive you away. And I think when we think about applying scripture in that way, it means that it's not going to be that quick fix of application that you might want for your day to day. But the more that you come applying scripture with a big view of Jesus and letting that shape how it drives to your heart, the more in the kind of big picture of life you're going to be buoyed and shored up when hardship comes, and you've got this big picture of him as your good shepherd in that season, when suffering comes, and you're able to say, no, he is the light in the darkness here. He is fulfilling that Isaiah passage, and I can trust him, and I can trust his faithfulness to lead me through that dark valley. And I think so kind of coming to him as he asks us to do, humbly, prayerfully, is always the kind of first. Well, that was definitely kind of our kind of trajectory and our kind of seeking to be our posture whenever we were seeking to apply this. Would you add anything?
It's a helpful barometer, I suppose, when you're thinking about application, in asking, is this leading me to Jesus? Because if it's not, I might be on the wrong path.
Yeah, and I think that the central, we're not the central person in the story, are we? So whenever we approach any book of the Bible, then we need to see it within the story arc of salvation. And we, therefore, as we seek to hear it for ourselves, we try and place ourselves in the story. A big part of that is getting ourselves in the right spot in the story. Like we're not the hero. We're the ones who are being shepherded. We're the ones who are the fools who get it wrong, rather than and in need of help. And so I think that's been a helpful thing, as we've done a number of different books from different genres throughout our podcast journey. And so the salvation story has been a really helpful just anchoring of making sure that we don't just jump off into just wrong application, actually, because that is a temptation or a possibility, I think.
And we're always kind of treading that line, aren't we, of like actually questioning each other on where we're landing, and is that a helpful line or is that not? And one of the really helpful things for us, the fact that we did split, we have chosen to split John's Gospel into sections, and we're not studying it back to back. We had a couple of years between chapters 1 to 5 and then 6 to 12, and our growth as Bible handlers, our growth in applying Scripture, our growth in seeing Jesus in all of Scripture, I think was evident when we came to the next kind of section, and we were all the more kind of hungry to sit with that posture and to kind of see how these truths were going to apply to our hearts in a way that, was just deeper than it was a couple of years ago. And that for us is really exciting, because it means the Lord is really at work, and he is continuing to be at work, and we love that as we open up the Bible together.
I guess I'd love to ask you finally about applying John's Gospel in light of those truths you've mentioned for us. Were there any ways your studies in John really, really impacted or applied to your life?
Well, I think that maybe just referring to what we've said previously, this beholding Christ and what that looks like, to keep running to him. And as we see different aspects of who Jesus is throughout John's Gospel, then I'm more persuaded that he is the one that I need, and I want to run in his direction. I want to run according to his instruction as well because of that. And I think that spending time in John's Gospel, it's like Jesus is more vibrant and more alive and more relevant to my everyday than he was before I got into John's Gospel. I think just the tangibility of just this is it. This is the Jesus that I want to follow, and I want to share that with others as well. I think I'd love to invite someone who doesn't know Jesus to come and behold Jesus, and that, as Christians we are always wanting to do that, but to be really deeply eager for that and profoundly kind of like, yes, this is the best thing you could possibly do, is to come and look at Jesus. I think being in John's Gospel just deepened that conviction, that it's like it made me want to be more invitational. Like, come, like, do you know Jesus is this good? Like, why don't you come and have a look?
That purpose statement, you could say, that you pointed us to in chapter 20, like, it's in his name that we're to have life. It does mean we can stop running after the things of this world and think we're going to find life there. Actually, it's in knowing this really compassionate, really kind, gentle, good shepherd. That is where we get life. So those day-to-day beholding him, feeding on him, running to him, you're so right. It does just fall out of it, even from the very beginning. Chapter 1, verse 4, in him was life. He's the one we can run to.
That instills confidence, doesn't it? The more that you gaze at Jesus in the pages of John's Gospel, the more that you have confidence that what he says goes, and the more I want to sit under his word, the more I want to trust his wisdom over the world, the more I'm desiring to obey his way. And ultimately that means the more I'm going to be transformed into his likeness, because I'm desiring to be like he is. And that's not necessarily a kind of straightforward outbox of reading John's Gospel, but actually the Bible tells us that, doesn't it? The more that we gaze at the transforming nature of God's glory in Jesus, the more we will be transformed into his likeness by God's Spirit. And that's true. It feels like it's a very up and down journey. It feels like it's not, there's no kind of fast forward button to being, made more into his likeness. But day by day, as I sit at the feet of Jesus in these pages, I'm rejoicing in him more. I'm delighting in his love more. I'm happier to sit with what he says and trust that he can help me to obey in my day-to-day as I seek to share him with my family and with others in where I am locally. So yeah, I think that the kind of overflow of application is so big, isn't it? And it's so broad. But the joy that we've had in Jesus himself through this has been just a precious gift from the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Well, Felicity, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and it's wonderful to finally put the pieces of your story together, as it were, from all the breadcrumbs you've left us from your podcast. We really can't recommend your podcast enough, actually, for our listeners. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have listened, but I just think it's excellent. I know that I suspect your target audience is for Christian women, but actually I think it's a really, really great podcast. I think personally there's not a lot of devotional podcasts or podcasts I listen to in my devotions which I find that helpful, but I find yours is actually really, really helpful. It's just a great way to get faithful Bible teaching. It's only like 10 to 15 minutes if you listen on 1.5 or 1.6 speed. So yeah, men, women out there, absolutely cannot recommend Two Sisters and a Cup of Tea enough. But Felicity and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's been really, really great to hear from you.
Thanks for your encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bible Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like or share wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would like to leave any comments or get in touch with us, you can find out more in the show notes. This episode was produced by myself, Tiff Carter-Whitley, and Leo Elbourne. This is the Bible Matters podcast, encouraging you in faithful Bible teaching and ministry.